Welcome to our weekly program of current affairs, our discussion program. We call it Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're here. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. Joining me as always is a distinguished panel this week. Rabbi Gaylia Rooks, the Temple, Reverend Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ and Molo Village CDC, Reverend David Harkleroad, South Point Church, New Albany, and Father John Stoltz, St. Aloysius Catholic Church. Thank you and welcome, panel. Policing has been a frontline topic for years, and today we will take a look at how two cities continue to grapple with what's next. Here in Louisville Metro Police overwhelmingly rejected a new contract that offered the largest ever pay raise. The Courier Journal reported that the police union blamed it on, quote, lack of trust, and that members felt the proposal didn't go and do enough to, quote, stop our constant loss of officers or to recruit the best talent available. Meantime, Mayor Greg Fisher's administration said the contract offer gave a chance to stop officers from fleeing to better paying agencies and to build more LMPD accountability in the wake of anger at the police shooting of Breonna Taylor. So now we turn to our panel on moral side of the news, and let's hear your thoughts and hopes for moving forward.
So obviously we need more police accountability. I mean, all across the country, everybody's calling for that. And I do think that police officers should be paid very well. They risk their lives, and hopefully they are dedicated to protecting all citizens equally and doing so as carefully and respectfully as possible. I did not read any of these materials that were presented, the contracts and things. I only read, what was in the Courier Journal and commentary on it. I understand from the police department's point of view that it's not only about money, and that some of the verbiage in the proposed contracts makes them nervous because it's very vague and wide open. And I think that just needs to be nailed down. I think that they are closer than what good news, in terms of what's good news, what sells papers, what gets people talking. But I maybe it's the eternal optimist in me, but I believe they are closer than what is being shared with the public. I think that there are definitely some areas that need to be fine-tuned and carefully spelled out. We are really working hard on making sure that there are no violent, racist, or offending, aggressive cops. And they need to be sure that, and I think they deserve to be sure that the contract does not have language that can be misinterpreted or misused depending on, the mayor, the council, the this, the that. To protect the good cops, of which there are so many. And we want to be able to treat our police officers fairly. Obviously, to me, that's obvious, but that they hold police officers who are unnecessarily aggressive, unnecessarily racist. I'm trying to think if there's ever a time where it's okay to be racist. And that there are ways to go about doing this. We need more African-American cops in African-American neighborhoods and cops of color in neighborhoods of color. And I think there needs to be a lot of consciousness raising and courses and what am I trying to say? What's that test that you can take to find implicit bias and things like that? I think those issues should be addressed head on, and they need to keep talking, and we'll move forward, God willing.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is really balanced. I actually appreciate that. From my vantage point, this is not shocking that we find ourselves in this place. The previous summer when there were the BLM riots and everything going on, the Louisville leadership did not back the police officers. They backed lawlessness. And so it is, and people were saying defund the police. It is no surprise to me that the police feel that there's a trust issue here with the leadership. And, there's not enough money to keep you in a toxic work environment. So I do believe this is about trust. It's not about money. I think the liberal leadership, the way that they chose to go with the rioters, the lawlessness over the summer has really hurt their standing with the police, who are simply seeking to enforce the laws that were put in place. And so always room to grow, always room to make sure everything is up front and transparent as possible. But it's not surprising to me that we find our police unwilling to stick around in the city. In fact, I'll say one more piece. I love Louisville as a city. I went to grad school there 15 years ago, but Louisville's leadership direction the leadership has really caused Louisville to deteriorate over the past 15 years. Homelessness is now rampant. They are not helping the homeless community with their policies. I know businesses that have moved out of Louisville. I personally know a realtor who's struggling to sell downtown real estate. People don't want to go into downtown Louisville. And so our police aren't the exception. The police are part of the rest of our folks in the community who don't appreciate what the leadership's doing. And I think the leadership has largely created a toxic environment. And I would go so far as to say, we can kind of see this across the country. Liberal leadership is creating environments that are not healthy. And so by and large, we're seeing people leaving these communities. So I think this largely comes down to the leadership. They need to make decisions that are trustworthy and good for the people and the police officers.
I look at just a little bit different. I believe that we should have good policing and they should be well paid. I also believe that they should not be held to a different standard than any other employers. And as I read through some of the language in the news article talking about GPS, monitoring cameras and all of the various pieces and parts of that, that is not something that's unusual for other employers to do with their employees. And so for the police or for their union to think that those are unrealistic for the police, I think that is part of the problem. They want to have a standard higher than other employers are willing to live with. And so while I think good pay is important, I think accepting that they also work for the community and there are some expectations for them working for the community should be in place. I think that they should be free to dictate some of those issues, and that our city leadership has the right to make those requirements for them.
I don't know if I could comment on the details of a contract negotiation between the police and the city. I don't know if I don't think I'm qualified for that. What I'm paying attention to though is sort of, I guess you'd think of it as a spiritual moral issue, and that is many in the police department do not trust the city administration who's creating the contract. There's a lack of trust there, and whether or not that's justified, I don't know. But the fact is that there's a reality. I mean, there was an overwhelming response to turn down this contract, and ultimately, what people were saying was a lack of trust. And so I'm thinking of that as a spiritual moral issue in which, in some ways, that trust needs to be rebuilt. I don't know if that may not mean giving the police officers everything that they want, but finding a just way where people in the community say, this is a just contract and we will abide by it. That's something that's there. But also can also be seen in the other way. One of the things I've become aware in these past few years, in terms of all the stories about policing, is that there are many people of color who do not trust the police department. So while the officers may not trust, in some ways also they're not trusted. And one can then go to the question, because they'll ask, well, is that trust justified or not? So in every instance, is it going to be a bad decision if a police officer pulls over a person of color? Can they expect it in every time? So I think police officers would say, well, no, not every time, but it happens, we guess, sometimes. The fact is, the number of stories have brought up a lack of trust. So therefore, I think we've got a spiritual and moral issue around trust. And the fact for communities to work together well, there does need to be this sense of civic partnership and civic trust that happens. Overall, someone could, again, looking at from a spiritual moral perspective, one of the things that you could see in society right now, and I don't think it's too subjective, is to say in many of these arenas, there is too much stress and not enough of stress sort of being relieved in a healthy way. A lot of sometimes enemies being made, caricatures made, and in many ways, not a healthy way to redress it. If I looked at the work of a police officer, no one doubts that is a high stress job. And I would think that there needs to be ways, even built into the contract, of ways of good care for them. I would want them to be cared for as persons and not to suffocate in the midst of the stress and of anxiety of our larger world that sometimes comes down on them. In the same way, where we have communities and peoples who suffer in lots of stress-borne areas, I would want some good and healthy ways to sort of relieve that in a way. If that helps communities live together better and reestablish some places where you still need contracts. I'm not going to look at this too rosy, but I mean, you have to have contracts and you have to keep people accountable, but in ways that we live together well and can work and negotiate well with each other.
Yeah, I'd like to move on and tie this to our second topic. In Minneapolis, they've been working to find a new policing path of its own after the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers there. This week, Minneapolis voters said no to a charter amendment to replace the police department with the Department of Public Safety. Among other changes, the amendment would have replaced the police chief with a commissioner who would be nominated by the mayor and approved by the city council. Opponents of this charter amendment criticized it for a lack of specifics and too little community input. Supporters say it could have had lasting impact. So continuing the discussion about police reform, panelists, is it possible for police reform to satisfy everyone?
It's never going to be possible to make everyone happy all the time. That being said, one hopes and prays that we are all on the same side of protecting our communities with equality and justice. I think that what Minneapolis did or started is very important. Again, I did not read that whole, but apparently there weren't enough specifics and details for the community to feel comfortable moving in that direction at this point. I think I read in various places people who are very excited about the possibility of either totally substituting the police department with a Department of Public Safety, or merging, making two that work together hand in glove. But even people who were tremendously supportive of that idea were not able to vote for this particular ballot measure because they felt like it had not been thoroughly fleshed out, that, conceptually it may be good, but we need more details. And, it's a scary thing to try to completely revamp. It's a huge, huge task, but I also think that it is a sacred task. I believe that parts of our systems are broken, and that systemic racism has permeated our society to the point where we aren't even, many of us are not even aware of it a lot of the times. Even those involved in it are not aware of it, which is all the more frustrating. And, again, that's why I think that implicit bias training and awareness, counseling, John, you were talking about officers in such a tense situation. I think that counseling certain groups and opportunities for police officers, you can't just assign police officers, okay, well, we have a therapist, so go whenever you want. I don't think that's going to work, except in extreme cases or when one is, required by the department to do that. But I applaud the efforts of Minneapolis to not just get past the George Floyd murder, not to just say, okay, well, we're making a few little changes, but to try to address real change. And just as I said with Louisville, I believe that they will continue to move forward, and that they will find, God willing, and with the work of a lot of people on both sides, find a way to revamp the public safety, the policing, the protection of all the citizens of Minneapolis and in other cities across the country who are also examining this. On the one hand, it feels like it's been a long time and how much has really been done. But on the other hand, it's not been a long time when one is trying to really completely reimagine how this important job, we're all committed to public safety. We just want to make sure hopefully everyone just wants to make sure that it's done with the absolute most respect for humanity, the humanity of every individual. Obviously not respect all people regardless of color. That we even have to say that in the 21st century just boggles the mind and hurts the heart.
I believe in an order, but I also believe that policemen globally and across the nation need to be revisited on their policies, their procedures, the services that they offer. All of those things need to be addressed. If not, we'll continue to have the Breonna Taylors of the world and Floyd world and all of the other unjust situations. And so I think we have to continuously change how we do things and realize and be willing to accept that there are better ways to do things and not just continue to do the same old because that's what we did in the past. And today's a time to make those, I think, positive changes. And change is difficult for people. They make people uncomfortable. And so I think we're just in time of growth and I hope improvement. We in the African American community want improvement. We want policing. We want all of those things. We just want things to be done fairly and justly.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of room for improvement. We in ministry are on the front lines of seeing mental and emotional issues. And so we know there's a lot of factors that go into this. But I think that the people of Minneapolis sort of rejected the philosophy of this shift because of a couple critical issues. One, critical race theory kind of has embedded in it that authority is inherently untrustworthy. And so that puts people automatically at odds or in disagreement with our policing force. I think that's a huge problem. I think the people of Minneapolis see that inherent problem in this plan. I think the second thing is we have to acknowledge that policing throughout history has had elements of enforcement, and it is a dangerous job. And if we shifted to a primarily social-based enforcement, you're going to see a lot of social workers wounded or killed. So I think there has to be this acknowledgement that we need actual policing, a police force that is an authority. And I think when we start there with some basic principles, we can say, yeah, there's a lot of room to grow in how we can help defuse situations before they become lethal.
I think every institution it should be dedicated to continuous improvement, finding ways to improve services over time that are good for employees, in this case, police officers, and also good for the civic community as well. It continues to improve. I don't know that much about policing professionally, to know about that. Only a little bit, say what I hear from CultureNet, and that actually the police in policing have changed, I think, over time. That's what I understand. You hear phrases like community policing and those kinds of things. Those are things, I think, efforts to make policing improve, to make it more effective, to make it better. And I think they study that and look at that. And so I would want that to continue to happen. I looked at and just consider the legislation proposed in Minnesota, not looking at it detailed, but just sort of reading just around it. It seemed to me to be almost too radical, too much change without the detail. And I look at that as maybe a political problem, in that what we're talking about here is public safety. And then to propose a major change in public safety without knowing its effects is pretty risky to do politically, I think. And I don't know if people are ready to take the risk. On the other hand, there is, I think, a healthy conversation to be made about policing and what happens in the police experience. I don't think it's fair to police officers that they should act as in ways where they were not trained, and that is to deal with those who have mental illness. Police officers are not social workers, although I think they have a lot of actually real life experience in that. They're not psychiatrists, although I think they run into those kinds of issues too. And I think the whole move to incorporate people who are well trained in those areas to help police officers and to help the public with a sense of safety, to find ways to do that, I think would be embraced. If you could find a way to do it that I think really works and helps out the police and also makes the public safer and does it in humane ways. I think all of those things could be really important and really good to do.
Yeah, I just don't see why it has to be either or, David, the way you were saying that, you can have this or you can have that. I don't see why we can't merge the two and find a way to have training for police or partnerships with social service workers to be able to really meet the needs. Not just de-escalate, which of course is a great start, rather than escalating, but it is a very complex issue. It has to do with, as I said before, systemic racism, economics, education, frustration, and a lot of this is beyond what the police are trained or capable of handling through no fault of their own.
Yeah.
But when you answer a domestic disturbance call with guns blazing, that clearly is not the answer.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it's complex and that we can have some of both. I think John said a minute ago, and I agree, it seems like they want this radical swing the other way. And I think there has to be a balance struck. And I think one of the reasons these things are getting voted down is because there have been some just extreme ideas proposed as opposed to balanced social discussion about how we fix these problems. So I agree. I don't think it's only one or the other. And I certainly believe, we've got a ways to go. We need to work to bring the right responses to these situations where we can de-escalate them. I agree with you.
So how much of this is political and how much of it is what the community actually wants?
Oh, I would argue that I think it's very political. I think that we have just our political forces are creating disturbance in our communities. I think that if you go to the average person on the street, we're a lot closer together than our political leaders are trying to make us feel.
All right, panel, we have just a few minutes left. I want to change topics at the end of our program. Supply chain issues could affect your holiday gift giving. So why not consider regifting as the ultimate in recycling? Before you groan, you never know what's tucked away in that closet of yours. Did you hear that a Super Mario Brothers cartridge in near mint condition was found in the back of a closet in Floyd's Knobs, Indiana, went for $88,500 in an estate sale? So, panel, what do you have in your closets? Let's get in there and dig. Who has an example of what might bring a lot of money and you could regift it and make a fortune?
Oh, I didn't know you meant regift right before we started the show when you said.
Or keep it for yourself.
Okay, keep it for myself. I have, I actually saw this at an antique store near my sister-in-law's house, but I wasn't willing to buy it because it was a little pricey. And then a few months later, it was right near my birthday. And my sister-in-law said, the antique store is going out of business, so I'm going to buy this for you. Is that okay? And it's the original Beatles Apple Watch. I don't know if you can see it, even has an apple on the face of the watch. And it says, the Beatles. And
that's amazing.
And it says this watch is made in commemoration of the Beatles and their great contribution to the music world. This watch will keep the memory alive as time goes by.
Do I hear a bid for that? Anybody want to bid for that? Well, sadly, that'll bring to a close our program, Gaylia. Great gift and regifting. Thank you, Gaylia Rooks, Jamesetta Ferguson, David Harkleroad, and John Stoltz. It's never too early to consider a tax-deductible year-end donation to the WHAS Crusade for Children. Just go to WHAScrusade.org, WHAScrusade.org to donate securely online. You can also mail your donation to WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. New this year, if you'd like to catch this program again, just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next week, we'll be back with a brand new edition of this program. Thank you, panel, and so long for now.